Welcome back to the DFS Build NFL edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, ready to go over the Thursday Night Football kickoff game between the Ravens and the Chiefs. We have a showdown slate. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also going to be terrible. It is what it is, but the NFL season is back, and it's very exciting, in my opinion. So, best way to approach this kind of thing is just to get a lot of different lineups in and just pick your spots and take a stance. So I'll get to that in a little bit. But first, let's just look at the opening lines for this game. Ravens are coming in to KC as 3-point dogs, and the total is set at 46.5. In my opinion, the spread is correct. The Chiefs should be the home favorites. The Super Bowl winner in this kickoff game is, I think, 7-3 over their last 10 games. The Chiefs are obviously very, very good at home. They're very good in general. And they've kind of had the upper hand in this series against Baltimore overall. The total seems a little bit high, though. If we look at these defenses, they were ranked 1 and 2 last year in points allowed per game. Two very, very good defenses. I'd probably give the edge to KC in general at this point, based off of what they accomplished last year. Their defense still looks really, really good. But they're both good defenses. The only difficult thing to kind of project is the fact that both offenses are highly capable of putting up 30 points, and KC got a little bit more explosive through the draft. They will not have Hollywood Brown, so they're not as explosive as they were planning to be coming into week 1, but still, they look pretty good. The Ravens lose Odell Beckham Jr., but I don't think that is a major loss, especially if Rashad Bateman can be healthy. And then they also inherit Derrick Henry, a bruising back, to take over for the departed J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. So in theory, both these offenses got better, and they were already good to begin with. So if I was betting on this game, I would probably go Chiefs straight up because the 145 money line looks pretty good at home. I think the Ravens spread, if you can find it at like 3.5 or 4, that might be okay too. And as for the total, I would probably go under here just because these kickoff games tend to be a little bit lower scoring. Both the defenses are very, very good. And it's just, I think it's a tough spot across the board. So I would probably go the under here. That said, betting is a little bit different than DFS. You absolutely can follow that logic and stick with, what I said there as far as the spread and money line and the total. But that is kind of what a lot of people will be thinking. It's probably going to be a low scoring game. Let's target the running backs and play some of the defenses a little bit. So I think if that ends up being the case and those end up being chalky, we want to pivot from that a little bit. All right, before we dive into the actual ownership numbers and projections, let's look at the last time these two teams faced. Granted, it was in the AFC title game, a lot on the line. Things are heightened. It's the playoffs. So I don't think you want to just go there and kind of mirror everything that you're seeing, but it's still worth noting. Obviously, low scoring game is only 17-10. The Chiefs won that game and went on to win the Super Bowl. Not a big fantasy day for anybody, but I mean, as far as production go, Travis Kelce smashed 11, 116 and a touchdown. Rashee Rice had 8 catches on how many targets here? 9 targets. So both of them were very, very involved in the passing game, and it was pretty concentrated as far as the target share went, which is to be expected. That obviously could change with the inclusion of rookie speedster Xavier Worthy. And then obviously down the road, Hollywood Brown. But right now, I would imagine Kelce, Rice, Worthy are the top targets for KC. On the other side for the Ravens, Zay Flowers had a really good game, 5 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown. He did have that costly fumble that basically lost them the game. But he had 8 targets, led the team. Mark Andrews was still kind of getting his footing after missing a bunch of time with a broken, lower leg. So he didn't have a big game, and he actually was in a car accident recently. So I'm wondering if Mark Andrews is going to fly a little bit under the radar. Rashad Bateman actually was healthy finally for the first time in his career. Didn't have a major statistical season, kind of played behind Odell a good amount. But with Odell gone, I think Rashad Bateman is in for a big spike. He's another guy I'll be looking at. Another interesting thing is Isaiah Likely. He only had 3 targets in that playoff game, but they've been saying all summer that he's going to be more involved and they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. So does that make Likely an interesting contrarian play? Probably a good cheap option. Let's see what's his price at here. His flat price is only 2.6K. So yeah, I would absolutely consider that. And does that take down Mark Andrews just a tiny bit? It very well could. All right, so there's not a lot to glean here. Obviously, they held Lamar Jackson in check, 54 rushing yards on 8 attempts. he did have a long of 21, and it's Lamar Jackson. He can kind of get going against anybody. He was not very efficient against them. Took 4 sacks, threw a pick. But yeah, it's not a good matchup. So no shocker to look back at a much more intense game and to see not elite fantasy production across the board, but it just gives you an idea as to how these teams matched up the first time. If we look at matchups, fantasy points per game allowed last year against each position, you're going to guess that they ranked very highly against these positions. Ravens were the number 1 defense against quarterback. KC was in the top 10. We go look at running back. KC again in the top 10, and Baltimore is right there with them. Against wide receivers, KC was 4th, Baltimore inside the top 10, and against tight ends, I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. Chiefs are up here just outside the top 10, and Ravens just outside too. So probably more middle of the pack against tight ends, which isn't that surprising considering Kelsey shredded Baltimore in the playoff game. So tight end could be a spot where we target them a little bit, and for the beyond that, we might just be hoping for touchdowns or for the random big play that people really can't account for. Now, what does that tell us really? Not a whole lot. And also, it's the first week of the season. These defenses could regress slightly. Players could get hurt, all these different things. We don't know exactly how everybody's going to be used. Like, could we come in and Bateman or Xavier Worthy or Likely just like don't play that much at all? Sure. You never know. Or they could come in and just play like the entire game. Like, it's just impossible to know. So for me, I just try to look at, player talent, roll as much as we can, matchup if it really makes sense. In this case, the matchup's kind of bad for everybody, so I'm just not going to worry about it that much. It just we're dealing with the same, level playing field that everybody else is. All the matchup sucks across the board, so you just want to pick the best possible guys and also, consider projections and consider ownership. So starting at the captain slot here, I kind of want to expand my player pool, and especially if I'm rolling out like 150 lineups, I want to make sure that I'm getting some kind of exposure to all the guys that I'm really high on. But you can't stretch yourself, you can't spread yourself too thin. Obviously, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson are going to naturally be the chalkiest captains. And why? Because they average the most fantasy points per game. They have the best floors. They both are mobile and can score, points with their legs. So no doubt about it, they have the easiest, quickest path to like a safe 15 to 20 point fantasy game. If this game is like a really ugly defensive battle, they are 2 really safe picks because they're, they have the ball in their hands all the time. And they obviously have really, really high ceilings. As far as ceiling goes, I think it's pretty obvious that Lamar has the highest ceiling just because he's a more explosive rusher than Mahomes. Let's see, so right now Mahomes does project with the better fantasy projection. I just think Lamar does have a better ceiling based off of that reason. But I mean, the ownership is split 15 and 15% at the top for captain. So you really can't go wrong either way. And the ownership isn't different enough for me to have a major lean. To be frank, I'm probably going to try to get both of them in my lineup. The question is, how much do you put them in your captain slot? And which one do you put in your captain slot more? I might just kind of let my system, the RotoGrinders lineup tool here, do some of that work for me and just go and prioritize other captains and then see how it shakes out and then look at the overall exposure and adjust from there. So the next step would be looking at what other guys do we like that are projecting well and carrying ownership in the captain slot. If Rashee Rice is going to come in and be the third most owned captain, that's one spot where right away I'll say, okay, I'm going to be underweight on Rashee Rice, I guess. Got targeted well in the playoff game, had 8 catches, but he didn't really do much with it. It's just, unless they really go out of their way to target him down the field, you're probably looking in this kind of matchup at a lot of short area targets. And then, Casey hoping Rashee Rice does damage, with yards after the catch. Obviously, he's explosive and quick in short area, really dangerous in open space. So, he's not a bad play at all. We know he's going to be involved, especially with Hollywood Brown out. So I like Rice. I think with the ownership where it is at captain, I think I like him a little bit better in the flex. Travis Kelce, a little surprised that he's coming in 4th highest owned. So right away, he's probably my favorite captain option based off of ownership. He projects just as well as Rashee Rice. You could really argue that he has the better ceiling. And obviously, if Mahomes is going to have success, there's a really good chance that it is because Kelsey is having a good game. And also worth noting that if there is a matchup to be attacked, it's the tight end position. And Kelsey shredded Baltimore the last time he faced them. So all of that looks really good. So right away, the first guy that I'm looking at in my captain slot, really happy to see that he's coming in at 4th in his captain ownership, would be Kelsey. And if you can't or don't want to put him in captain, he looks great in the flex as well. The running backs, I am not super excited to play. I think, and here's the big reason why. There's a few reasons, honestly. Number one, a matchup. The matchup stinks. I think Pacheco is going to get a decent amount of volume. He ran like crazy in the playoff game, and just the Chiefs like to get him the ball a lot. I think they added Perrine recently. There's a possibility he cuts into the third down work. I don't really think he will, though. Personally, I'm going to kind of ignore that a little bit just because I feel like it's such a recent addition, and we know Pacheco is a good third down back, and they've been talking about wanting to give him that full workload. So assuming that's the case, he would be the running back I would want to own between the two. Fortunately, he is less owned, and he is cheaper. So I definitely prefer him over Derrick Henry. And the biggest reason why is Derrick Henry is majorly touchdown dependent. I don't really envision him just completely crushing this Chiefs run defense. And he's going to need 1 or 2 touchdowns to really hit. So obviously Henry is in play. Coming in at almost not even 9% ownership in the captain slot is certainly appealing. And he's on the best, probably arguably the best team he's ever been on, even though he's had some decent Titans teams. But the Ravens O-line, their system, the presence of Lamar kind of keeping defenses honest. There's nothing bad about Henry as far as his upside, but he's not a guy who catches passes. He's not as efficient as he once was. He's now 30 years old, easily could start breaking down and all that. Long term, if you look like over the course of the season, Henry is probably a fade for me. And it's just individually, when you're looking at showdowns or like DFS, it's all about the touchdowns. Can he score touchdowns? So if you think he's going to have a big touchdown game, absolutely you can play Derrick Henry. More of a flex play for me. And based off of ownership and similar, actually Pacheco even projects better. So I just think all across the board, Pacheco is the running back to play in this game. Moving on, we have Zay Flowers coming at under 7% ownership in the captain. Very, very interesting. He had a good game against KC in the playoffs. Obviously, he's going to be a focal point of the offense. Odell is no longer there. There's obviously Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman, but Zay is the guy. I would not be shocked if he ended up dominating target share with Baltimore this year. He comes in with a decent 13.5 fantasy point projection. He's cheaper than Pacheco and Derrick Henry. So across the board, Zay Flowers looks like one of the better captain plays for sure. But as we get down, this is like my range. Starting with Zay, honestly. Kelsey's really appealing because of his upside and floor and being 4th owned guy here. But we're looking at Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Xavier Worthy. These guys feel, well, Xavier Worthy isn't safe, but these guys feel like they have really high ceilings, and at least Zay and Mark should have pretty good floors too. And none of these guys are coming in at more than 7% ownership. So Mark Andrews, given the matchup and assuming he's healthy, looks really, really good here. Way cheaper than any of the guys we've discussed yet. Yet he does have a really nice ceiling. The matchup is one of the better matchups on the board as far as position goes. And we know he can catch a lot of passes. We know he can get multiple touchdowns in the game. So really like him as the captain too. And Xavier Worthy is probably my favorite cheaper stud, so to speak, just because he's only 8.7K and he's a home run hitter. He has had the fastest 40 time we've ever seen. And he's not even going to be that owned. 5% owned for a guy who can take the top off the defense and just blow this game wide open, return an element to Casey's offense that they haven't seen since they traded away Tyreek Hill. So he's very, very interesting as well. Quick pause for a coffee drink. So that is probably the end of the plays that we feel really, really good about. And I will just personally, this is the way I play. I'll be underweight in the captain slot on Mahomes, Lamar, Rashee. I like them, but I'm just going to be underweight because they're chalk. As far as chalk goes, Kelsey being 4th highest owned player, he's my favorite chalk stud to go after. No problem there. If Mahomes throws 3 touchdowns, and 2 of them go to Kelsey, Kelsey's going to smash. So he looks really good. Henry's fine, but Pacheco is my preferred option after Kelsey. And then Flowers, Andrews, Worthy all look really, really good as guys I would absolutely be overweight on in the field. If I'm doing a single entry, I am probably going to look at Zay, Andrews, or Worthy and try to build around one of those guys. They're cheaper. They have decent projection. They have a high ceiling. And immediately I'm going to get different from the field, and then I'll try to figure out how to get different beyond that. Chiefs and Ravens, I do not want to captain them. Kickers, I do not want to captain them. I do think the defenses are in play because I think the game total is a little bit higher than it should be. But these offenses aren't offenses that really turn the ball over that much. Mahomes doesn't take that many sacks. He doesn't really throw picks. He doesn't give up defensive touchdowns. So it's just like, as far as like, if you agree with me that the game could be a little bit on the lower scoring side, you could play them for that reason, but that's not good enough to captain them. If you're going to captain a defense, that defense is going to dominate the game and get 20 fantasy points, and they're not. I don't think they're going to. Same with kicker, Justin Tucker and Harrison Butker, really good real life kickers. They should be involved in this game just because, like I said, it's going to be a little bit lower scoring. It's going to be more methodical. I don't think those big explosive plays are really going to be there as much as we want them to be. So I can see them both making 2 to 3 kicks and getting, maybe 2 extra points or so. So they'll be viable, but I would keep them in the flex. Isaiah Likely is the first punt that I really, really like. If you're not going to captain the guys that I already talked about, Isaiah Likely is the first guy that pops off. And in the captain slot, he is only 3.9K. So I'm actually a little shocked that he's like going completely overlooked. Honestly, he's my favorite captain. My favorite captain punt right now, which obviously the cheaper you go, the more you can stack up these players and feel really good about your lineup. The problem is, yeah, you get all those guys that are going to have a good game like Mahomes, Lamar, Kelsey, whatever, but your captain needs to hit. If Isaiah Likely comes in and steals 1 or 2 touchdowns away from Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers, all the Andrews and Zay Flowers ownership is going to look bad. You're going to have a super low owned stud, and he's going to be in your captain. So love Isaiah Likely in this spot. I think he's going to be a lot more involved than anybody seems to think. Super cheap, and he saves up salary so I can go get whoever the hell I want. Other punts are in play, but not really super appealing to me. Like, let's see. Nelson Aguilar. Don't really love it. What's his actual price in here? Yeah, I'm not really feeling him at all. Nobody else really is standing out as far as a punt. Like Isaiah Likely is my favorite punt here by a mile. But you can consider Perrine at 4.5K for the captain. Justin Watson at 4.8K. Justice Hill is supposed to be involved. He's a little bit pricey at 6.6K for me. I'd rather do that in the flex. Excuse me. But yeah, so I'm looking at Isaiah Likely. That's my favorite punt play. If you're doing a lot of lineups, I think it feels a little bit safer. Like if you can be, okay, I'll go, if he's at 5% ownership or no, 1% ownership, then I'll go like 10, 15% ownership on Isaiah Likely, and hopefully the lineups I use him in hit. I'll be more than that on Isaiah Likely. I think he's going to have a good game. And if you're doing a single entry, that's just a fun way to do it too, because then you get all the exposure to the other guys that you really, really like, and then you just need Isaiah Likely to have a decent game. And if he has a really good game, then you might be looking at takedown. If you don't want to do the Isaiah Likely thing, I think Bateman, Worthy, those 2 guys are very, very interesting based off their prices and their explosive ability. Andrews and Zay are way safer, but still have a ceiling and aren't that owned. Next up, Isaiah Pacheco. He's the preferred running back in this game. Fine flex play or fine captain play. Kind of prefer him at flex because I don't think he has a monster ceiling. But at only 8.1% ownership projected right now, that's pretty appealing, especially to leverage against a little bit more owned Derrick Henry. If you're paying all the way up, Kelsey's my favorite stud to put in the captain. And no matter what you're doing, I do want to roster Mahomes and or Lamar in all my lineups. One thing you can do is kind of project for an injury. I mean, you definitely need to consider it at all times. What if first play of the game, Mahomes tears his Achilles, or what if middle of the game Lamar gets a concussion, what have you. You can just plan for that in a couple of your lineups and just go away from these guys that are going to be mega owned. And I don't know if you want to take the dive and go get their backup quarterback or not. That's what some people do. And then they end up winning freaking tournaments because they do something stupid like that. But on a showdown slate, literally anything and everything is in play. So I wouldn't rule it out completely. That said, I try to be, somewhat logical while also sprinkling in some contrarian thinking. So for me, that's going to be rostering Mahomes and Lamar, trying to get to Kelsey and or Pacheco and Zay or Mark. And then the best way to do that for me is to start it off with Isaiah Likely. So if I type that in, I put Likely in that at the captain slot, I go get Lamar and Mahomes, and I really like Kelsey, and I could even get Pacheco, and that brings me down, and I could go get Xavier Worthy or Rashad Bateman to end it. My computer's freezing as I do this. So that is I'm just spitballing here just to get ball rolling. I've already told you how I'm approaching the slate and the guys I like, but just running through it, Isaiah Likely and the captain, I can get Lamar, I can get Pat, I can get Kelsey, I can get Pacheco, and I can get Worthy or Bateman. I think that looks awesome. You can pivot Worthy to Bateman. You can eat some salary and pivot Worthy to one of the kickers or to Justice Hill, what have you. The other thing I'll leave you with is you do want to take a stand. You want to pick one of these teams. You want to think of game flow, and you want to say, how is it that these guys are going to hit? And how might the game play out to get these guys to where I want them to go? So if I have Likely in the captain and only Lamar, then perhaps the Ravens are playing from behind and Likely is getting fed, or perhaps Likely scores early, and gets the ball a little bit late as the Ravens are playing from behind. And then I have a 4-man Chiefs stack. A lot of debate as far as like if you want to stack 5 from one team, go 5-1, 4-2, or split it. I don't think splitting it gives you enough leverage, but I think going at 4-2 or 5-1 makes a lot of sense. All right, so that does it for me. Hopefully this helps you a little bit, gives you a bit of clarity as far as how to approach it. I would, try a lot of different combinations, and I would suggest using a lineup optimizer to maybe give you combinations that you just wouldn't think when you're hand building. And the best way to do that quickly is obviously to set your exposures a little bit higher for the guys you really like and you want to get an edge on with as far as ownership goes, and then just see what it pumps out for your lineups. All right, that's going to do it for me. Hopefully this helps you. If it does, give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel. Football's back on Thursday. Let's go get one. Thanks for watching and good luck.